Cool. Well, hi everyone. So Carel and myself, I'm involved in Sixpence, is the company that he presented before. I'm also involved in a company called Bitmac, and I'm a co-investor with Carel in that business, and that business is a Bitcoin mining business. So we've been deeply engaged with the utility in our country. We'll name no names, and several other instances across Africa. And yeah, in terms of, we're getting right into the meat of it.
Yeah,
okay, great. So from a Bitcoin mine perspective, what very few people understand about a Bitcoin mine is the ancillary benefits associated with the excess heat or the heated water that kind of cools down the rigs. We underestimate the impact that can have on a community, and generally where you deploy a Bitcoin mine, you'll find that community is either being disintermediated or they're being sunsetted. So you got like, a couple of 100,000 people there. And from a just energy transition perspective, what do you do with them? A Bitcoin mine is a beautiful answer to that. And not just from a mining benefit perspective, we'll get to that in a second, but I mean, we're scoping out right now, we have scoped out, taking heated water, so 70 to 80 degrees Celsius water, and piping that through soil. And to heat up the soil, we've looked at aquaponics, greenhouse augments with the hot water, the heated air that comes from that. So if you're going to air cool it, the heated air, you could do a lot with heated air in those Celsius, right? You can do tanning, you can do chilies, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. So from an agri-tech perspective, what we generally see happening with Bitcoin mines is this ancillary benefit where the offshoot from it, the affluent from it, which is heated air and heated water, goes towards uplifting the community from an agri-tech perspective. So you can create a whole ecosystem. So you can have aquaponics, you can have tilapia fish, you can have agriculture spawn within that. And there's a whole kind of circular economy thing there. So someone can then work in that facility, and if we identify someone that's really good, they can kind of migrate up into the Bitcoin mine facility themselves. Because having a Bitcoin mine facility, from a technological perspective, it's not really that complex.
Yeah.
So we can uplift that skill set to kind of fix the ASICs, replace the ASICs, etc. So there's a great circular ancillary benefit to the community of putting a Bitcoin mine in.
Okay, could you talk to me about energy arbitrage and keeping the grid stable?
Yeah, so because those are the main benefits, and then the ancillary benefits. So the reality of the ancillary, if I can say this, the benefits is that it makes the financial model work. The economics of Bitcoin mining cannot work anymore. It's too late. I wrote an article back in 2018 saying why Eskom should mine Bitcoin, and at that time it did work, and the economics were great, and we'll get into that later. But if you take an ASIC, you plug it into this plug here, and you get whatever commercial rate this building gets from Eskom, you're going to mine it at a loss. So you have to adjust your entire business model these days so that you actually use these ancillary benefits, monetize them. Otherwise, you're not going to make a profit. Now, in terms of grid stabilization, energy arbitrage, I think that's the main thing. That's what Bitcoin does. And if you don't realize that, again, if you just plug it into your house, you're not going to make any profit, especially not at residential rates. But if you think about it, so Bitcoin mining is transformed away from that, away from having just a miner or a graphics card or something plugged into your house and then printing money in that way, in that sense. It is now a much more complicated, much more fine-tuned business model in which you have to realize these benefits. So if you look at the Bitcoin network, it is a customer of last demand. It is something that will always consume power. Doesn't matter what time of the day it is, doesn't matter the quality of the power, nothing. It's a heavy power user in that sense. And on the other side, it spits out rands in your bank account. And that's it. It's like this black box. You don't have to overcomplicate it. It's this black box that uses power and generates revenue on the other side. And the black box is very simple. It's not like a manufacturing plant or a smelter or something like that. It's very simple. It's like putting on a kettle. So that is essentially what it is. But the benefit is there's no contract. You don't have a contract, a supply contract. Some credit agreements like the municipalities have with Eskom currently, where you might get paid, you might not get paid. It's just this black box that uses power and spits rands out on the other side. And why that is so important is because today Eskom sits with a very unique problem, by the way. About 3 or 4 years ago, there wasn't enough power in our country. I think we all remember that vividly, right? And we coined the term load shedding in South Africa. There wasn't enough power. Now we sit with exactly the opposite, because South Africa is such a incredibly resilient private sector, most resilient in the whole world. something happened during load shedding, and this is everyone put on panels on their roof, and suddenly we took away somewhere between 6 and 8 stages of load shedding from the grid. So 6,000 to 8,000, we took away all of Eskom's profit, cream of the crop there on the top. So Eskom don't have to supply that demand anymore. So now Eskom sits with the exact opposite problem. They don't have enough demand. They don't have enough clients. There's no more load shedding, but they're only delivering about 60 to 70% of the power that they used to deliver about 5 to 6 years ago. So that's the demand that there is now. So that's very bad for a utility that sits with 300 to 400 billion rands with debt. So Bitcoin mining fits in perfectly with that. And you have to realize those benefits. You have to realize the ancillary benefits, and you have to monetize them. Otherwise, the business doesn't make sense.
Okay, can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just don't get too specific on Eskom. You're getting real specific on Eskom, which we're not allowed to do. But let me just explain something. So from a Bitcoin mine perspective, what makes a Bitcoin mine unique, and this is something that we always jump over, we just assume everyone understands it, but it has the capability to take 1 gigawatt of power instantaneously, and then you can switch it off instantaneously, and you can switch it back on instantaneously again. So that ability for it to consume that amount of power to boot up and be productive, and for the power to be taken away from it, i.e. switched off from it, that's quite unique. So what he's describing is the duck curve issue. So in the morning, you and I shower, we plug in our shavers, we do all the stuff that we do in the morning, high utilization, right? The duck curve, the back of the duck goes down, and you got the tail of the duck in the evening, where we get home and then we put all our appliances on again, etc. Now, most energy utilities in the world suffer from a collapse in the back of the duck. Why? Because before, during load shedding, we had high usage, and then we go before all the solar noise, the curve was kind of gentle on the top. There was still huge demand for the power. So those big turbines spinning, the frequency in the grid could be maintained. There was no shedding of power, etc. But what happened was an enormous amount of alternative energy has been deployed in South Africa. The big challenge that we have with that alternative energy is we don't have the transmission lines to get it to the source. So that's a big issue. And Eskom's gone on a big tender to private sector to say, help us build out those transmission lines. So what we have is huge congestion on the grid. But simultaneously, while that has happened, you and I have put solar on our roofs, malls have done it, businesses have done it. So that curvature has completely collapsed. So it's like collapsed right down. So from here to there, there's this big collapse. Now in that collapse is where a Bitcoin mine fits in. So you kind of switch a Bitcoin mine in there, and what happens is the duck's curve of its back is very gentle, which means the frequency on the grid is maintained, which means those big hydraulic engines can keep spinning at the rate that they're spinning. They don't have to shove cables into the ground to shed power and all of that, because the Bitcoin mines are eating them. And also, because of all the alternative energy in the country coming about, the big issue is congestion. How do I get all that solar and that wind to source? Well, you shove a Bitcoin mine at point of origination where the power is being generated. You monetize it at source right there in a few containers, and that kind of subsidizes your transmission lines going out. So in terms of its congruence with the energy utility, it's not just for Eskom. It's pretty much anyone in the world is suffering from this right now. We can get to AI and what AI does in the grid now in a bit too.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, that's going to be my next question. But before I get there, analysis was done. I think it was done by perhaps the two of you, but Carel was involved for sure. Get this. If Eskom had implemented the strategy in 2020, Eskom would be debt-free today.
Yeah.
What's the number? 280 billion or somewhere?
No, they wouldn't be debt-free. The debt would be settled, and they have a surplus of how much? Is it $200 million?
Okay, so
200 million.
You did the numbers.
It's just the most astounding statistic. So there is an entire new financial model to be built around Bitcoin mine. Let's move straight into AI and Bitcoin. In fact, AI and data centers. So I'm going to start off with the following statement: is that the debate, the contestation, the fury, and the yelling about Bitcoin energy has disappeared completely off the pages. There are two reasons for that, I assume. One is that the ASICs and the cooling kit has gotten more efficient, so it's using less. But the real reason is that the energy is now going into AI, and now everybody's screaming about AI energy. I'd like you to give me, both of you separately, a short thesis on the intersection between AI and Bitcoin mining, AI data centers and Bitcoin mining.
Okay,
Go ahead.
So let's go for it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of things. I think the noise has died down around Bitcoin mining because I think analysis has now properly been done around what energy is going into Bitcoin mining. And I think the number sitting between like 60 and 65% of Bitcoin mining in the world is done with renewables.
Yeah.
Okay, not fossil fuels. Because of the very reasons I've just explained to you now. Renewables like hydro, you've got solar, wind. The big challenge that they have is they don't have the capability to monetize that source. So the business cases are really difficult to break through. So when you put a Bitcoin mine at a hydro plant, you're immediately generating, it's a Starlink dish, it's a bunch of ASICs, and you're monetizing right away. And that subsidizes your deployment. And essentially, you're accelerating the renewables. That's the first thing. We're seeing that all over the world. We're also seeing miners being deployed for grid stabilization. And I think grid stabilization is a big issue because we talk about the duck curve, but also when wind comes onto the grid, when the sun is shining, when all of us, that's not usually when Eskom needs that power. So that's the time we can take that power. So, like what do we call it? We take that demand, that flex demand, and we suck it up instantaneously, we give it back. So we do accelerate. But I do think from an AI perspective, the big challenge that AI data centers have, and we're seeing this in the United States at the moment, the big challenge that we have in the world is not compute. It's not like the software side, the algorithms, etc. It's actually the electrons. We're running out of electrons. We're running out of enough electrons being thrown at this thing called AI. And the problem with a big AI data center, it behaves in a very erratic manner on the grid. So it's not a stable power consumer. It surges a lot. It's got if you look at its profile, it's very erratic. It goes up and it goes down, etc. Now, it's so obvious, the congruence between an AI data center and a Bitcoin mine. So just like we can stabilize a grid, we can stabilize and become a buffer between the AI data center and the grid itself. And we're seeing this happening. So in the United States specifically, it's well reported, but we're seeing it in other places in the world too. Big Bitcoin miners are actually opening up space for AI compute. And for two reasons. Number one, it increases the PE ratios of these companies. Your PE ratio, if you have a Bitcoin mine, sits between like 4 and 5. You put an AI anything in there and your PE goes to like 18 to 25. So that's why a lot of the Bitcoin miners are moving in that way. So they're opening up space for the AI guys to come in. It improves their market cap, but it improves their valuations. That's one reason. Second reason is once they're in, they don't have to sell their Bitcoin because hyperscalers pay so much for space and power, etc., for their compute. These guys are sitting with a hoard of Bitcoin that they're mining on the side, and they don't actually have to sell that. So it's changing the business models of Bitcoin miners in the world completely because they're partnering. And then obviously, the third thing is that they create this buffer between themselves, i.e. the AI deployment and the grid itself. And that buffer makes the AI look more gentle, it looks more congruent, it looks more fluid in terms of an energy signature on the network itself.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The clearest way to see that is in the stock prices and the PE ratios of the companies that do combine Bitcoin mining and AI and those that don't. Because, like I said earlier, the OPEX efficiency of a Bitcoin mining plant is extremely sensitive, especially towards the electricity price. To give you a very back of the napkin example, calculation, but the Bitcoin network will pay you anything between 120 and 150 currently per kilowatt hour. That's how much you get paid. So any power tariff beyond that is infeasible. And then what would an hyperscaler pay you? So currently their break even is much more than that. Like they'll probably suck up any power north of R3 a kilowatt hour. So so you got to find out if you want to deploy a Bitcoin mine, you got to find these very, very cheap power sources, which is difficult because you're now competing with the AI. So the optimal solution is to combine the two. The problem with AI though and the hyperscalers is that they are very sensitive towards the power quality. So like you don't want to shut down an AI model mid-training like an LLM. Through its training cycle, you'd like it to complete ideally, and then on the other side, Bitcoin don't mind at all. You can shut it down multiple times a minute. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think you're talking about the other way in, and I think that's a very good point. So it's not just their energy signature on the grid that we stabilize, but it's also the type of power that's coming into the center. The Bitcoin miners can be the buffer for that too, and because they want clean, stable power. Because if you don't give them clean, stable power, their machines have volumes. Those volumes have data file systems, and then there's applications on top of that. It's a very different sensitive domain.
You started off when you started to answer about talking about the color of the energy that's used to power Bitcoin mines. So it's about approximately 30% dirty power and 70% green power currently. This is 70% dirty power and 30% green power to produce your iPhone, and cars are even worse. Bitcoin mines are now among the most green industries in the world, and that single fact has been lost on most people. Let me talk about, I said to Stafford earlier when we were sitting over there that there's the only person who's as much as a Bitcoin maxi as Stafford is Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy, of Strategy Now. And so I wanted to talk about your short argument as why Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency worth even using in a sentence. And I'm going to let Carel argue with you.
You can't do that. That's
I looked forward to this question all week.
Okay, so he's like a proof of stake maxi. I'm a proof of work maxi. He works very closely with me. He knows the reality. And all I'll say is for all of you guys that are not in Bitcoin land, AWS. You guys went down this week, and all your crypto went down with AWS. So look, for me, there is only one. Okay, so everything else is very interesting computer science projects. And I think they could serve a particular purpose, and they may have adoption in some way or form. But as an investor, I'm not interested in them. I just don't. All these theses around these things, I always look at it and I think, why are you using a blockchain for that? Why don't you just throw a database with web services and you'll probably have a better outcome associated with it, right? So smart contracts are interesting. I haven't seen a scaled deployment of reference in the world yet. I haven't. And I've seen lots of people being thrown at it because blockchains are, at the bottom, it's actually like really shitty technology, right? To replicate an entire database every single 10 minutes. I mean, if you just think about it, it's not an efficient way to do something. But Bitcoin's use case as this layer one is an incredible use case. Its market cap, I mean, outstrips, it outshadows everything else. I do think, this is my thesis, my personal opinion, I think everything finally comes back to Bitcoin in the end because the liquidity lives there. There's complaints about like it's not fast enough, etc. But when you take a look at what's happening in the L2 world, what people are doing with RGB and some of these other technologies, I'm just not a proof of staker guy. I mean, he comes up with this proof of stake arguments and he'll argue against it, but I just look at it and I go blank. I'm just not interested in things like Ethereum and all the others. I'm not. And I speak as an investor and I speak as a maxi. And when I say investor, personal, I've been in Bitcoin since 2014. I have 95% exposure to Bitcoin right now. I sold my car, bought Bitcoin a few years ago. Carel knows about that. I've completely maxed out for Bitcoin, completely. So it's not just in a philosophical perspective. I truly believe in the asset. And then secondly is, as an investor in folks in the technology space, the only company that I've leaned into that's very interesting for me is what Carel's built. Okay, and that is Silver Sixpence. Because that's a tool that gives you transversal views across the entire crypto ecosystem. And playing around in that world with him shows me why I love Bitcoin so much. Because there's just so much noise in that world. Now, for those of you working on other blockchains, you're working on other smart contract stuff, you're working on some wallet technology, good luck. It's interesting. It's very fun. But when it comes to scaling it out and from an adoption perspective, I always think you're going to be coming back from an L1 perspective back to the original. And I still believe, I believe there's only one. And that's my personal opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the investor answer. So the engineer's answer is quite a bit different. So, I think what Satoshi Nakamoto invented in 2008 with proof of work is just absolutely fascinating. And if you drill it down and if you want to unpack what proof of work is, it's just a game theoretic system, which means that it just works on human emotions. That's really the only thing that makes this entire protocol work is the fact that humans are greedy.
Yeah, but that's what makes everything work in the whole world.
Everything revolves around that, exactly. But that's why it's so brilliant. It's because he managed to embed the fact that humans are greedy into a protocol that is now digitally enables value to be moved across the globe. So if you think about it, the way that he did it is that he says that he created this blockchain or this ledger, and he said anyone in the whole world can write to the ledger. You can write anything you want there. You can put a transaction on there. But before you do that, although anyone can do it, you don't need permission or to go through an application, but you have to pay something. You have to pay. So you have to make a payment before you do that. And the only universal currency across the entire world, something that is valuable, is electricity. It's scarce across the entire globe, right? More or less the same price. So you used electricity as a proxy and said, for you to pay, you have to burn money. You have to burn some electricity, you have to waste it, essentially, and then you can prove that you did that, and then you have the privilege of writing to the ledger a transaction. And then you get a reward for that. You actually get paid after that. If you told the truth. If you did not tell the truth, if you try to lie, you're going to lose the money that you've paid. So that's human greed.
He's sounding just like a Masie now.
Yeah, I'm getting to the next part.
I'm like amening, amen. Yes, it's money, math, physics, energy. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's an absolutely brilliant idea, and it's a brilliant protocol, and I mean a marvelous breakthrough that we all love. But then you can take that same argument now, and you can say that what else is valuable? And this only is possible in the last few years, and that might be the native token that you actually use to pay, right? So that's also valuable, and it's also universally, globally, digitally acceptable and usable without permission and without going through an application form. Now that wouldn't have worked in the beginning because Bitcoin wasn't valuable. Bitcoin only started gaining some sort of universal value 2 or 3 years in its life cycle, right? And that's why I think Ethereum did so well, is because they also started off with this universal consensus mechanism, which is proof of work. They bootstrapped the system to a point where no one can dispute that the Ethereum token is valuable, right? That is not for dispute. I think everyone can agree that there's value in the token, and then pivoted towards using the actual token as the means of paying that you are expressing the truth or writing the truth to the ledger, and that's proof of stake. So now, if you're going to lie, you're not going to lose your electricity because there is none. You're going to lose your Ethereum token, which is just, in theory, as strong as proof of work. And so,
that's good. What you just said there, I'm going to call you out as complete shit. That last bit, rubbish. It offers the richest folks with the most ability to stake control in the network. And that doesn't feel very much like Austrian economics. It feels very much like Keynesian economics.
Yeah, so let me pull you guys off each other as you're wrestling over so we don't end up in a rort on stage over here. And just make the comment, I'll leave this hanging, is that if there had been no environmental pressure of energy in mining, I wonder whether Ethereum would have ever gone to proof of stake.
Yeah.
They went to proof of stake because of political pressure. I'm not sure they went to proof of stake because it was a better consensus system.
But don't respond. Leave it there.
Leave it in there. But it is what it is there, and unlike Stafford, who's 95% of his portfolio is exposed to Bitcoin, I'm taking the other conservative position, 50% Ethereum and 50% Bitcoin. Let me move on to. Just tell us what Sixpence does, Carel, in brief.
Yeah, earlier today, those who missed it, we crunch blockchain data, we create intelligence, we monitor every single transaction that happens on every single blockchain, every single exchange, every single second of every single day. And then we take all of that data, we normalize it, it all looks the same, we add debits and credits, we make it look like financial data. And then we offer it to regulators, auditors at banks. And anyone else that wants to build.
So let me explain it. Like we went he and I were in New York a few weeks ago. And we went to Goldman Sachs, and we sat down with the top crypto guys at Goldman Sachs. I mean, the top 4 guys that pretty much control crypto, I'd say, in the United States. And we described it this way: right now, crypto is like this incredible horse. It's incredibly powerful. It's beautiful. It's fast. It's strong. It can do so many things. The problem that banks have. And PwC, when we met the lady that just presented Laverne before this, we mentioned this to her too, and she nodded, like vigorously. The problem with crypto right now, it is this horse. But everyone's trying to ride this horse at the moment, bareback, barefoot, naked, holding on to its hair, and trying to make it go left and then trying to make it go right. And it's just too powerful. So what Silver Sixpence does is it essentially is a company that's built the saddle with the spurs, the reins, and it gives you the ability to control this power. So you've got full view into it. You can make it go left, you can make it go right, you can make it stop, you can analyze it, you can do what you need to do with it. And that's what this tool set does. And that's what everyone's struggling with right now. In South Africa, banks are struggling with crypto. Not because of the incredible innovations that's possible with crypto, smart contracts, all the stuff that you guys talk about, the banks want to do it. The challenge that they have is it's a horse without no reins, no saddle. They don't know. What Silver Sixpence comes in is gives an organization the ability to report on it, manage it, view it, proactively engage around it, etc. Regulators need this. The biggest challenge that we have in the crypto industry, in the world, is the fact that we don't have regulators trying to stop it anymore just because they don't like it or they don't understand it. We have regulators that want to stop it because they don't have the tools to manage it. Right? They just don't have the insight. They don't have the systemic view of what's going on. The South African Reserve Bank today does not have detailed systemic views of what's going on in crypto in South Africa, broadly speaking. We are engaging with them. The IFWG doesn't. SARS doesn't. FISCA doesn't. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange. I've just launched a company on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange with Warren. It's the first Bitcoin treasury company in Africa. We launched it a few weeks ago. It's live now, Africa Bitcoin Corporation. Biggest challenge with the JSE was, how do they keep us responsible? So we're going to buy Bitcoin with, in an accretive, dilutionary manner. But what are we going to do with that Bitcoin? Where are we going to put it? Are Warren and I going to put it in the back pockets and head off somewhere and change our names? Is that possible? So we need a tool set like this. So the JSE is looking at Forvis Mazars, an auditor, utilizing the Silver Sixpence tool set to look into Africa Bitcoin Corporation. They're looking at custody. Where's the crypto? When we make a transaction happen, so we sell shares, we buy it. Where's the wallet address? Did that transaction actually happen? Validating proof of reserves, ensuring there's no rehypothecation. All those challenges, Silver Sixpence resolves. And that to me is a massive, massive, and that's why I'm so into this business at the moment with Carel, because that's, for me, the #1 issue in the world at the moment.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you didn't do the big brag, so I'll do it for you, is if you have a look at Silver Sixpence's client list, you're going to find the big overseas exchanges and various other institutions that are using their tool set, which makes you very different than a lot of the other local companies we've got here who only deal locally. We're getting quite close to the end. Carel, you've worked in the CSIR, which is, I suppose, where you cut your teeth on the technological side, and I wanted you to give a view on two things. What is the technology base in South Africa? What does it look like? Do we now have enough skills to compete globally on the real hard technology side? And also, what is your view of the regulator? I know that both of you have spent quite a lot of time, the regulators.
I think it is difficult to compete globally just because it's very difficult to attract skills and the ability to work remote locally. I won't single out anyone, but like if you're an organization in this industry and you can't give your employees upside, then unfortunately, you're not going to get the best skills. And unfortunately, a lot of the big companies, I think maybe the type of companies that makes up the top 40 in the JSE and so on has these very strict rules and so on, and that gives the startup a little bit of an edge. So maybe if I can leave that there, and then in terms of the regulators, I think they're doing a very good job, like mostly following global guidance. I mean, our regulators is just a filter through from Basel, FATF, IMF, World Bank, etc. And the policies that they've put out obviously is just implemented by us, and that's the reason why we were grey-listed. And I'm hearing good things that we will be removed from the grey list very soon. So our regulator, in that sense, are doing well. And without stifling innovation, I have to give them that as well. There's some real innovation in this space happening in South Africa, and the regulator largely allows for that, which is good. There's 250, 300 or something costs registered now. But I do think that there is one key thing missing, and that is enforcement. And the FATF made it quite clear as well when they grey-listed us. I think the FATF actually very specifically mentioned casinos, saying that, look, for the last 5 years or something like that, when they published their report, There's only one enforcement action for money laundering against the casinos, and they highlighted that and said that's impossible. There should be more, so I want to see more enforcement. It is to do enforcement in the crypto industry. You do need advanced tools. So like it's not easy to you can't just do it manually. It's impossible. So I think that one is missing, and we'll have to see that. And I don't want to be anti-crypto or anything like that. I mean, we need it. We need it to have a safe space. We need it to keep out the bad actors. As you guys know, we have a lot of them in South Africa. So we need to get rid of those people. And we need to see regulators and law enforcement step up and do that.
Good. Okay, I think we've come to the end over here. I want to just leave a space for 2 questions, and I apologize for not having enough time. I'm sure there are a lot of questions.
Can I just add something to what Carel just said? I think from a regulator perspective, Carel and I are very much in our personal capacities engaged. We get pulled in a lot to behind-the-curtain discussions with our regulators, a lot. And I will say one thing that was quite indicative of where our regulator is there was a clause that the IFWG published out, and that clause was clause 18.5 or 1.3 or something. And that clause pretty much said that you couldn't list a security on the JSE and have that security be exposed to crypto in any way or form.
Yeah.
We worked very, very hard on that with the Altfest team and the Africa Bitcoin Corporation team, and we lobbied, we engaged, etc., took a lot of sessions, and guess what? That clause is gone today. Okay, so that clause no longer exists. And that allowed the JSE to allow us to do what we've just done in the JSE.
Right.
But before that, it wasn't. So it's not like the doors are closed. They're willing to listen. But I think the biggest challenge that we have right now in this country from a regulatory perspective, and it's not because of theology or religion, it's really you need to separate a digital commodity from everything else.
Yes.
That's the big challenge that we have in the country right now. You cannot regulate Bitcoin under crypto. Right? It's very different. An unregulated security, a speculative asset, is very different from a digital commodity, an asset without an issuer. So we're still in the education phase of that with the regulatory bodies in South Africa to have them understand that when you're going to do regulation, you need regulation for Bitcoin or a digital commodity, and there's only one at the moment, and then crypto. Right. And it's very, very different in that world. But it's a work in progress.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you, do we have to till 11:10 or is 12:10 or 12:05? Let me just end off with one comment. Sorry, we're not going to be able to get to questions, but I'm sure that our panelists will be around to speak to you if you want to, is that in England, when crypto sort of arrived in 2021, when it became a thing there in the public consciousness, the Parliament didn't know anything about crypto, so they retained the Law Commission of Wales, which is an external consultative body to the Parliament of England to say, what is this thing? Their conclusion is that our legal system has no hole for a crypto asset. It's exactly the same thing. You need a whole set of laws to define a thing called a digital asset, which is they're doing in England, although they're moving rather slowly. Thank you all very much for your time, and thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.